Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Olivia, also for the invitation. I'm coming from Germany, and I'm responsible for a small research team that does international research. So my perception of the studies, of course, is under the influence of that comparative analysis that we have been doing across countries and across systems. And from that, maybe some of the surprises that I suffered or went through when I read the papers. So apologies if that does not really meet your, let's say, behavior or expectations. But on the other hand, I think in the context of the discussions we have had today, and particularly also in the context of what we have learned from Ursula Staudinger, I found these two studies quite remarkable in a number of ways. And since I learned that the discussion is also meant to help the publications, so I first go into each of them, because as you also have seen, they cover quite a broad range of different aspects of what we have been discussing today. Maybe I start with the latter one. I know that annuities are not really that type of favorite retirement product you would find in the US. And so I was quite surprised and see that there are annuity options within the DB schemes that public plans offer that are so well received and also allow an option among them. And what I found really remarkable was the approach that you take, including on the one hand that perception that a longevity increase requires a different approach to the way that products are offered in the context of existing and given plan structures. And you have worked on product solutions, on two product solutions that I also find remarkable, and I will speak about that later. I was just wondering if in the context of this discussion, it would not make more sense to discuss the plan level in plan level and plan rules that, as you show in your paper, sort of incentivize people to take, let's say, suboptimal strategies for their own future retirement income. And in that context also, I found it quite remarkable that, again, there is an understanding of early or young retirement that's surprising for someone from Europe. So retiring at age 50, 52, and entering a phase where you may or may not work, given that you may have a life expectancy up to 80 or 90 years, leaves you with a dramatic imbalance between life in retirement and life in work or labor, if that is the only work career that you might undergo. And I understood that you believe that many of the teachers or the general employees that drop out early will have other jobs that they will work in. But they are not part, as I understand, part of the retirement planning process. So contributions to whatever kind of pension plan in the next generation of employment are not taken into account. Is that right? Okay. Yeah. In a way, it also seems quite natural, given what Ursula told us, that we will have more flexibility in the way that we arrange for different types of work life and sabbaticals or other periods where we focus on education. So we have to reconsider this kind of how we match the different types of income-based retirement income, as I would call it, with your total retirement income. That's I found really interesting, and particularly with the flexible social security leveling approach that you've taken. You're taking up an idea that, where's Raimund Maurer? He already discussed with us, I think about 10 years back, that if you design a retirement product, it would be good if you took into account other existing income sources into the design of the product that you offer as a kind of a mainstream retirement income product. And in a way, it's exactly what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So although I, in the beginning, was quite surprised about a social security leveling product, the name is really funny for me. But it exactly does apply that kind of mechanic that we discussed early on, and which I think is something to take up back on the table for a broader discussion. Here in this context, it's just a minor share of members that choose this option, but I think it may have a career in the future that may go beyond that existing relevance or irrelevance. Yeah. And also, of course, the deferred annuity is an option that may help you to sort of offer a better solution within the existing plan. I don't think that per se the plans will be saved with this kind of options, but a deferred annuity, of course. Also here the idea, using a deferral to again combine different income elements and make use of the income from retirement for a later period in time. From my point of view, a deferral to age 60 or 65 is not really late, and it's not really a deferral. So the concept that we are discussing in Europe is that you defer until the age of 85 and use a deferred annuity, particularly for longevity risk coverage, but it's the kind of structure used in variable annuities or in so-called hybrid solutions. So in that context, the deferral is something where I believe it will have to be deferred to a later period in time, given the development of longevity that we are seeing in the population. But I love both ideas that you have implemented here, and I think that's really a great job. It's just that because the share of plans that you address here is so tiny compared to the overall, it may sort of stay below the radar if you can't sort of raise the relevance of it. And I think it's really worth discussing as a kind of model for others as well. And in that context, you have mentioned a couple of times, Bob, that plan rules incentivize a suboptimal income solution, particularly with the Social Security leveling product. There's a systematic behind it. Between 62 and 70, there is a kind of a credit built in, as taking the security, Social Security benefit at a later point in time, and we heard that comment earlier today by somebody in the audience. So there is of course a kind of mechanism behind it that you make use of, but I think it is quite complex for the individual. That's where maybe advice would need to set in. If you have to sort of calculate the different advantages that you may end up with meeting in the different constructions. So that's certainly something also that might need to be discussed. Why would people choose Social Security leveling or not, and even the flexible version? Yeah, so that brings me to the other study, for which I needed a bit more overview. And it has to do with a very rich theoretical input that you are giving in your paper. I found it really impressive because you really have a complete overview on what you see in the literature, more or less complete, in the context of decision-making and advice-seeking. And there are so many, I would say, little pearls in this paper that are unburied. So that's where I would focus in my discussion later. But my main criticism is that the richness of the theoretical context is not really matched with or by the findings that you present. So that's where also the conclusions, from my point of view, are not completely conclusive given the data you present. And I understood, just because we were slightly sneaking around, there is another half of this study that is published separately, where we would have received more information on the advice seeking of the members and of the behavior of this population. So I include part of that information into my discussion, although it's not shared with the audience, but I'm pretty sure that both authors can give you the literature. Most interesting for me again is this idea that you have to include an idea of advice seeking. And of course, the Mercer data set is fantastic. What we missed, that's the main point here, is to understand what was it that was concluded under administration, seeking advice for administration, or retirement planning, or investment. I give you an example. The peaks of retirement planning was in the 70s. You would have thought that people by then would have understood what they do in retirement. And also the question, what's the difference between investment advice and retirement planning advice, does not really become very conclusive. So examples at least, so what are the topics raised would have been fantastic in this context. From that other study we learned it's only about half of the members that take advice at any point in time. So maybe it's more a service contact, not so much an advice contact. And we also learn that it's the higher income groups, both on the account and salary basis, that are offered a qualified advice that maybe fall under the category of qualified advice that I would automatically connotate with the term advice other than service. So I think it is a useful study in the sense that it raises a number of issues that have to be looked into. Also the question of gender, not so convinced that the conclusions you draw are the ones that I would draw from this, but certainly I found it interesting to see in the other study that there was a preference of the channel web, internet, for men, and for women, the calls, personal contacts. So there is a bias in this whole sample because I think web internet was only introduced also within the middle of the time period under search. So we cannot really see what's driving the different channels, but I think it would be a most interesting approach for the question, how and which way should advisors address their clients' needs, which is a channel preference, whatever. And then, of course, the question that you raised in the paper also, is there a bias that is involved in offering advice through a plan administrator that uses or mimics the neutrality of the supers, but in itself has a commercial interest, which we find with the fee-based advice component. So yes, that I think is a relevant issue to understand if we discuss advice and what triggers advice, to go more deeper into the details, into the details that this sample offers to you. Okay, I could have gone on, but I'm not allowed to.
I think that was terrific.